A horse's tail is a critical anatomical feature. Made up of multiple vertebrae, muscles, ligaments, and tendons, the tail is crucial for balance, proper movement, protection from the weather, thermoregulation, insect repellent, and communication. All things that are compromised when a horse undergoes a highly controversial procedure and has their tail docked. Hey guys, how's it going? So good to have you here. I hope you're all enjoying a lot of time outside as spring has finally decided to arrive. I know that I have been spending a lot more time outside at the barn with my horse and outside with my dog. Hi, Padfoot. And I'm only mildly irritated by all of the bugs. I know that this is a very different setup than you're used to seeing me in. Yes, I am sitting on the floor if you're curious. I am currently struggling with a lot of different lighting issues. This room is not great with lighting, and today this is the only way that I could get something that didn't make me look super ridiculously orange, so I apologize. This is what you're gonna have to look at, but honestly, this is not what's important. What's important is the information that we're going to go over. Today I want to cover a highly controversial topic that I have not seen any equestrian content creators cover before, and that is tail docking in horses. My guess is the reason that I haven't seen it covered before is because most equestrian influencers and content creators don't have draft horses or don't specialize in draft horses, and tail docking is done almost exclusively in draft horses. I only really know what it is and know what the potential impacts can be because my own horse has a docked tail. There is a lot to unpack, so let's just dive straight in. But just before I start, I would like to clarify that everything that I'm saying today, all the information I'm sharing, all the comments I'm making, are specific to horses, tail docking in horses. I'm not talking about dogs or pigs or any other animal that can have their tail docked. Everything that I'm saying is specific to horses. Tail docking is the practice of shortening the tail either surgically or non-surgically by removing some of the vertebrae. Today, tail docking is done by two methods: surgical docking and ligature docking. Surgical docking is performed under anesthesia, and so this method is typically done by a licensed veterinarian. This procedure involves cutting through the skin, the muscles, the ligaments, the nerve endings, the blood vessels, and the bones of the tail. After the end of the tail is removed, the wound is stitched closed. Ligature docking is done by utilizing rubber rings or other materials to tightly bind the base of the tail, which cuts off blood flow to the distal end of the tail. Eventually, the end of the tail will die and fall off. This method is often used on foals, though it can technically be done at any age. The tail can also be docked to whatever the desired length is, but the typical length is 6 inches. So what is the purpose of this procedure? Why would somebody cut off part of a horse's tail? Fair question. Traditionally, tail docking has been done to prevent a horse's tail from getting caught in a harness or carriage or plowing equipment. This is why tail docking is typically only done on draft horses. Obviously, any breed can have their tail docked, but it's typically only seen in draft horses because draft horses are usually the ones pulling carriages and plowing and logging. Their sheer size and brute strength is just significantly better suited to these kinds of jobs than lighter riding horses. Many people also dock for aesthetic purposes or for the show ring or just because it's their personal preference. Some breeders of draft horses are also extremely focused on this aspect of a horse's appearance. For many draft breeds, it's almost become kind of part of their breed standard, though not officially. Draft breeds don't have to have a docked tail to be registered with their breed association, but it's kind of like an unspoken standard. If you Google like Percheron, for example, or Belgian horse, pretty much every single photo is going to have a horse with a docked tail. The tail being docked exaggerates the size of the hindquarters, so it makes the hindquarters look bigger and stronger, which are things that you want in a draft horse. Well, you don't necessarily need them to look that way, but you want them to have that strength. Arguments for tail docking have often included statements like, the tail represents a mortal danger for handlers. Supposedly, when a horse swishes their tail, you run the risk of the tail getting caught over top of the rein that is used to drive them, which affects the control that the driver has on the horses. Now, obviously, it's a very valid safety concern. I do question, though, does the tail can the tail actually really get stuck? I mean, I guess it probably could if the hair was really long, but I guess I probably shouldn't speculate on that considering I don't drive horses very much. Now, there are alternative solutions like braiding the tail or bandaging the tail, but these have often been rejected by people who utilize working horses because it would take a lot of time and a lot of work to braid or bandage the tail on several working horses every day in the morning. It would be time consuming and annoying. I get it, but also at the same time, something is time consuming or irritating for you, so you're gonna cut off part of a horse's body. I don't think time consuming or irritating is a valid reason for cutting off a vital body part. Some traditional forestry teams will actually refuse to work with draft horses that have their tail intact. Because fun fact, if you didn't know, draft horses are actually still used for logging in a lot of places in the world. Even places where we have access to machinery, like in Canada, in the US, we still utilize logging horses in certain places because the reality is that there are certain places that machinery just can't get to or maneuver through quite as easily. So draft horses are actually still used for logging quite a bit. Fun little fact for you if you didn't know. When tail docking is done correctly according to standards of good veterinary practice and performed by a licensed veterinarian, the risks of complication can be fairly minimal. The procedure itself can be completely painless if sedation and epidural anesthesia is utilized. Not every horse with a docked tail will experience pain or discomfort, short or long term, due to the procedure. But almost every horse with a docked tail will have their communication abilities utilizing their tail and their insect deterrent abilities compromised, whether minimally or severely, like my horse. A horse's tail is made up of 15 to 21 coccygeal vertebrae that are supported by a network of muscles, ligaments, and tendons. The skin of the tail, like the rest of the body, is extremely sensitive and has a lot of nerve endings. Welfare concerns associated with tail docking start at the moment of operation. Some dockings, even today, are still performed by non-veterinarians who have little to absolutely no vet med background, which means that you do not have access to proper sedation or anesthesia unless you are acquiring it through illegal means, and failing to use proper sedation or anesthesia will result in your horse experiencing extreme pain during the procedure. I mean, you are literally cutting off part of an animal's spine. I don't think a lot of people realize that. The horse's spine, they have all the sections of the spine that we do, although our, the last little bit, like our tailbone, very, very small, because we don't have tails anymore, right? But horses do. The tail is the end of the spine. When you're cutting off part of the tail, you're cutting off part of their spine. The healing process can bring complications like infections such as tetanus or blood poisoning, and healing complications like proud flesh or severe inflammation. And obviously, the risks of these complications are significantly higher when the procedure is done incorrectly and not by a licensed veterinarian. Pain and discomfort due to tail docking can be short-term, a couple weeks to a couple months worth of recovery, or it can become chronic and it can drag out over the remainder of a horse's life. The tail supports the horse's ability to balance, acting kind of like a sort of counterweight to the head and the neck. The tail will often swing and adjust its position when a horse makes sudden or fast movements or changes of speed, and this allows the horse to stay balanced and coordinated. Draft horses already have poor balance due to their size. It's significantly harder to get a draft horse to build the correct muscle to have better balance, and the reality is they're never going to balance the same way that a lighter horse would. Taking away part of their tail can make their ability to balance even more difficult. This can affect your horse's ability to move when you're riding them. If the horse is being ridden, a lot of draft horses are not ridden, but they are becoming more and more popular, and having a docked tail does affect their ability to move their body in certain ways when you're riding, and it also affects their ability to balance properly when they're lifting up their feet to have their feet done. The tail provides protection from the weather and the elements by protecting very sensitive parts of the hindquarters. The tail helps conserve body heat and keep moisture away. If you've ever noticed a horse that is outside in the winter and they're cold, you'll notice that they actually clamp their tail down and they hold it there, and that is basically them trying to keep more heat into their body. Now, you'll notice that with horses that have a docked tail, their idea of clamping is not quite the same. So when I'm trying to assess if my horse is cold, it's harder to tell because I'm like, okay, is your tail clamped? I can't really tell because with most horses, if their tail is clamped and you go to try to lift it up, you'll feel the resistance. With a horse that has a docked tail, you're less likely to feel that same resistance because they don't have the same amount of control over it. When a horse's tail is docked, it affects their ability to properly thermoregulate. And if you don't know what thermoregulation is, check out this video here. I made a video on it back in the winter. This video is talking all about what thermoregulation is, how your horse does it, what lower critical temperature is, a little bit of background info there. When their tail is docked, they can't effectively fan cool air over top of their body, which makes it harder for them to cool down on hot days. Horses also utilize their tail to defend themselves from flies and other insects. And if you're not an equestrian or like a horsey person and you're kind of questioning, like, does that even really work? Yes, okay? Yes, it is effective. Anyone who has ever been swatted by a horse's tail knows that it hurts. And God forbid you get hit in the face or the eye. I swear to God, it takes like 2 to 3 business days to recover from an eye shot. Like it hurts when you get swatted by a horse's tail. Horses whose tails are docked can't properly move their tail up and down or side to side, which means that they can't properly swat the flies away. A horse being unable to deter insects not only adds to their discomfort, but it also increases their chance of insect-transmitted illnesses and of allergic reactions. Padfoot was fed up with this. When behavior of docked horses was observed, researchers noticed that docked horses tend to actually walk a lot to get away from insects. And this causes extreme fatigue due to unnecessary energy consumption, and it also damages the pastures because they're constantly overrun. In addition to the mechanics and the body functions of a horse, the tail is also a vital part of communication and body language. The way a horse holds and moves their tail allows them to properly convey their emotions to other members of their herd and also to humans. The tail can show excitement, irritation, anger, pain, and relaxation amongst other emotions. Horses need to be able to move their tail up and down and side to side and all the way around. If you've ever seen a horse with a helicopter tail, do not make the mistake of thinking that it means the same thing it does for a dog. With a dog, they're like wagging their tail, they're super excited, and then they get the helicopter tail. Helicopter tail on a horse is not a good thing. If you are next to a horse or near a horse and they are doing a helicopter tail, get out of the way. Get out of the way. Not only do horses need to be able to observe each other's tails for proper communication to occur, but people need to be able to see them too. Horses often swish their tail when they are nervous, agitated, or irritated, and it's often utilized as a warning sign when people are doing something irritating. Most horses with a docked tail can't do this. This is unfair to the horse, as its ability to properly communicate has now been diminished or completely removed, and it also poses a safety risk to the handler. If you miss or ignore a horse's warning signal, they can be very quick to escalate. The last thing that you want is to have a chunk taken out of your arm because you missed a horse trying to swish their non-existent tail when you were brushing over a sensitive part of their stomach. A horse's ability to properly and effectively communicate is essential for their relationships within their herd so that they can have a functioning place in their herd, and it is essential for a horse to be able to properly live a life surrounded by humans. If a human cannot properly understand a horse's body language, whether because they're not educated on it or because the horse is incapable of properly showing those things, then that poses a risk to everybody involved. And obviously a horse has other ways of communicating. You know, there's the ears, there's the eyes, there's the body, the muscle tension, those kinds of things, but the tail is a vital part of that. Hey guys, a little bit of a change in scenery here. I wanted to be able to give you guys a close-up look at a real-world example of what a docked tail can look like and how it can affect a horse and their life. So this is my horse Polly. She is a 15-year-old Percheron mare and she has a docked tail. So Polly actually originally came from a Mennonite farm where she spent the first 8 to 9 years of her life as a plow horse and a logging horse, so it makes sense that her tail is docked. Now, I don't know what method they used for docking her tail specifically, but I do know that it was not done well. When you just look at her tail outright, it doesn't even really look like it's docked. Most people actually don't even realize that it's docked or don't believe that it's docked because of how much hair growth she has. But in reality, I have just worked very, very hard to keep her tail healthy and to promote hair growth so that she can get this much hair. When I met her, her hair ended about where her tail ends, which, oh yeah, I was being generous. The actual tailbone ends here. Her tail is looking a little bit worse for wear right now. You can't really tell that because it's braided. This isn't really a braid. I call it a cheater's fishtail because it basically is the same style as a fishtail, but it's not actually braided. But you can't really tell what it looks like, but I'll insert a photo or video here of what it looks like when it's not braided. She's missing a few chunks right now because I had to cut some out over the winter. One of the problems that you get when you have a horse whose tail is docked, Holly, do not knock that over. I swear to God, do not knock that over. There is a horse with its nose right up against the camera. Please do not knock it over. Thank you. One of the things you're going to get with a horse whose tail is docked like Polly's is that you are likely going to get a lot of poop and a lot of pee hitting the tail and matting it, because Polly on her own can only lift her tail to about here. There, if she's really feeling it. Holly, stop touching it. Stop. This is about how high she can raise her tail. She should be able to raise it more to here. So every time that she goes to raise her tail, to poop and to pee, it all hits the back of her tail, and then it often causes a lot of matting. Now that's why I tried to, oh my God, there's bugs on the inside of my hat. Okay, we're taking that off for now. That's why I try to keep her tail braided as often as I can. Over the winter, I unfortunately was not able to keep it braided because I was not able to get her into the barn or into the arena. And here in Canada, in Ontario, the winters, they're like -15 on average. And I can't take my gloves off in that temperature, and I can't braid with gloves on. So over the winter, unfortunately, I had to sacrifice her tail health. We had other issues going on, and so I had to cut a few chunks out of it because once you hit a certain point of the matting with the poop and with the pee, it's just not savable anymore. So Polly's tailbone ends here, when really it should end something around here. And the actual nub that is the end of her tail, I'll insert a video here, I think I got an okay shot of it, is absolutely covered in scar tissue, and that's how I know that it was not done very well, because it's not just normal, oh, here was where it was cut scarring, this was a hack job type scarring. Now, because of that, Polly's tail is incredibly sensitive, and the fact that I'm actually able to handle it, to touch it like this as I'm talking, is an incredible feat, because when I first met Polly, she would barely let me near her tail. She would barely let me touch it, she would barely let me brush it, braid it, anything, because it was so sensitive. Now, she will let me touch it, she will let me brush it and braid it. She's definitely not a huge fan of it, particularly when I'm manipulating it, but she lets me do it, and that's really all I can ask for. Now, because she's missing so much of her tail, Polly has incredibly limited control over it, an incredibly limited range of motion. Like I already showed you guys, she can't pull it up very high, which is what causes this matting, and we also get a lot of staining on her hock, and she also can't move it very far side to side. So I'm able to move it like this because I can control the hair individually, but she can't, obviously. When a horse goes to swish their tail at the flies, they should be able to swish the whole thing back and forth like that. Polly can't actually swish her actual tailbone that way. So when she goes to swish her tail at flies, it kind of just looks like this, which is not very effective for deterring flies. Now, because of this, Polly is way more likely than the other members of her herd to get attacked by insects because she can't get them off of her, and that often results in her getting absolutely covered in bug bites. I coat her in fly spray, the strongest stuff you can get, every single day in the spring and summer, and sometimes even that is not enough. Currently, Polly actually even has a swollen bug bite on her neck. I don't know if it's visible on camera, particularly in this lighting, but it was a little bump yesterday, and now it's like a whole thing, and it's warm to the touch because she's had a bit of an allergic reaction to the bug bite, which is unfortunate. Not a whole lot I can do about it. Now, this kind of problem can extend beyond just her getting a few more bug bites or an allergic reaction. A few years ago, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, back the first summer that I bought her, we actually had an incident where one day she came in during turn-in, and the inside of her back legs were completely cut open. They were just gashed, bleeding. We had no idea what happened. I cleaned them, treated them, wrapped them, sent her back out. They healed up, and then she came in another day and the legs were all cut open and bloody again. And this kept happening for about a month and a half. We could not figure out what was going on until I spotted her in the field one day, kicking herself like this. And at the time, Polly's feet were really not in good shape. One of her back feet was actually quite jagged, almost like a bread knife. So she was basically kicking the inside of her legs with a bread knife and cutting them open, because at the time her tail was so short that she didn't even have any hair that passed her hocks, able to even just kind of be somewhat of a deterrent for the flies. And it took a long time for me to be able to help the wounds heal properly. I had to get her fly boots so that she wouldn't kick as much, coat her in fly spray. Obviously, Polly and all the things that she deals with as a result of her tail being docked is a very extreme example, but it is important to talk about the extreme examples because they do exist. If you decided to dock your draft horse's tail and you had a licensed veterinarian do it, and everything was done properly, you could have very minimal risk of complication. You could have little to no issues for your horse down the line, apart from the fact that they can't communicate properly. Polly even struggles with her balance because of the lack of her tail when she's ridden, and when we're just asking a lot of her on the ground when she's trying to run and play with her friends. You can see that she can't make those same sudden movements, and it's not just because she's big, because Francine is bigger than her and Francine can do those movements, but you can see that Polly, when she moves, she doesn't have the same level of balance. She does not have that tail to balance her out. So there are all of these things that affect her life, and obviously, again, she is the far extreme end of the spectrum, pretty extreme, apart from the horses who would have severe infection. I don't know if she had infection when it happened. I don't know if when her tail was docked she dealt with any sort of infection or severe pain afterwards. I do know that she does deal with some level of pain and discomfort regularly, particularly when her tail is being handled more. So I try not to touch it when I don't have to. That's another bonus to keeping it braided, is I don't have to brush it as often, so I don't have to mess with it as often, and then she doesn't have to deal with that as often. But again, it's important to talk about the extreme examples or just the more severe examples, because even if they are a smaller percentage, they do exist, and you have the chance, even if everything is done correctly in the process of the docking, you still have the chance of running into issues like she did. I had no idea really what tail docking was or what it could mean until I met Polly, because I had never met a horse with a docked tail before. I had no reason to know what it was. And so now, of course, because I see that my horse struggles with it a lot. Are you annoyed with me saying this? I don't think so. Because I see what she struggles with, and also because of what I struggle with to help keep her, her tail and her legs clean and keep her healthy, it's something that I'm passionate about and feel the need that we need to talk about it more, because again, there are horses that can, have little to no complication. People can have it done properly, but you still run the risk of certain issues that that can't be avoided. When you take away part of your horse's tail, you do take away their ability to effectively communicate using your tail. When I watch Polly and her herd, she doesn't use her tail to communicate. She doesn't even use it to communicate with me, because she can't. She doesn't have that level of control over it. So Polly relies solely on her head and her face, and occasionally backing up towards other horses. But she doesn't have that ability to communicate her irritation with her tail, so she just goes in for a bite. And it's just kind of how things are for her. Yeah, want to a cookie? Saying, no, I'm sleeping. Thank you very much. I just realized that while I was filming this whole section of the video out at the barn, I am pretty much standing in one of those places where we always tell people do not stand, which is right behind your horse. Obviously, I do not recommend that anyone stand behind their horse, like right behind their horse. Like, if you're not a horse person, especially, don't stand behind a horse, and never stand behind a horse that you don't know. I will only stand in that position with her. I won't do that with any other horse. The only reason I do it with her is because I know her so well, and I know that she doesn't mind me standing there so long as she knows that I'm there. So in a lot of this parts of the video, I'm looking at it right here, you can't see the front half of her body, but I was regularly checking her face, checking her head to make sure that she was okay. She was pretty much sleeping through the whole thing. She didn't mind. So long as she knows that I'm there, she doesn't care. And I also know that the chances of her kicking me, even if I did do something that would annoy her, the chances of her kicking me are incredibly slim. Kicking is very hard for her, so I know that she's incredibly unlikely to do it, even if I were to do something that annoyed her. So again, I am not recommending that someone stand in this position with the horse. I don't feel like I should have to explain myself, because this is my horse and I know my horse, but I also know that a lot of people watching my videos are younger equestrians who are learning, and I'm grateful that you see me as someone that you can learn from. That is really my whole goal. So I want you to know I am not recommending that you stand in this position with a horse. I only do this with her because I know her so well, and I know what her typical responses are, and I am constantly checking in to make sure that she's comfortable with me standing there. This is not a place I would recommend that you stand. Let's move on with the video. Laws surrounding tail docking and other kinds of tail modification vary country to country, state to state, and province to province. Here in Canada, tail docking for cosmetic purposes is mostly illegal, with provinces like British Columbia having outright bans. Ontario, however, the province where I live, is actually the only province in the country that does not have a ban on tail docking of any form for any species. Animal protection laws in Ontario are, in general, just very far behind the rest of the country, and it is sad. The Canadian Veterinary Medical Association is actually very strongly against tail docking. The CVMA views the alteration of an animal's anatomy solely for cosmetic or competitive purposes as medically unnecessary and ethically unacceptable. Such procedures carry the risk of unnecessary pain with the potential for chronic pain and other negative welfare outcomes. The CVMA encourages breeders to select for traits that promote health and well-being and eliminate traits that negatively affect the animal's ability to perform natural functions, thereby eliminating the need for surgical intervention. The CVMA strongly encourages veterinary and breed associations to take steps to make non-therapeutic procedures for cosmetic or competitive purposes undesirable or unavailable. The US is very similar to Canada in that the laws surrounding tail docking and tail modification vary state to state. The American Association of Equine Practitioners, also known as the AAEP, also condemns the alteration of the tail for cosmetic or competitive purposes. The American Association of Equine Practitioners condemns the alteration of the tail of the horse for cosmetic or competitive purposes. This includes, but is not limited to, tail docking, nicking, and nerve blocking. When performed for cosmetic purposes, these procedures do not contribute to the health or welfare of the horse and are primarily used for gain in the show ring, or because of historical custom. If a horse's tail becomes injured or diseased and requires medical or surgical intervention, such care should be provided by a licensed veterinarian. The AAEP urges all breed associations and disciplines to establish and enforce guidelines to eliminate these practices and to educate their membership on the horse health risks they may create. Members of the AAEP should educate their clients about the potential health risks, welfare concerns, legal and/or regulatory ramifications regarding these procedures based on the relevant jurisdiction and/or association rules. I do really like that in the AAEP online section about tail docking that they specify the difference between cosmetic and competitive tail docking versus medically necessary tail docking, because there are definitely situations where medically tail docking is necessary. You know, there are situations where, let's say, gray horses are notorious for getting cancer, notorious for getting tumors. I've seen gray horses that have the complete underside of their tail just covered in tumor growth. If the end of the tail or a good chunk of the tail was covered in tumors that were, causing pain, discomfort, or some other sort of, health situation, it's going to affect their health, then yes, obviously, have a veterinarian, so long as they, say that it's the right thing to do, remove that part of the tail because that is a health concern. Or if the tail is damaged, or if, an accident happened where the tail something got wrapped around the tail and part of the tissue is dying, or for whatever reason medically it is necessary to remove the tail, then obviously amputate it. Well, not you, have a veterinarian do it, but it's good to make the distinction between competitive and cosmetic docking versus medical docking. Many countries outside of North America actually have laws that prohibit or regulate the practice of tail docking, allowing tail alteration only for medical reasons. Some of these countries include Denmark, Austria, Finland, Germany, Ireland, Portugal, Norway, Sweden, and the United Kingdom. Belgium actually banned tail docking for several species, including horses, all the way back in 2001, stating that there is no benefit for the horse and any potential advantages are all in favor of the humans. They did this in 2001, 24 years ago. That is several years before I was born. Ontario, let's catch up, please. Based off of my research and my personal experience with a horse with a docked tail, I do not believe that anyone should be docking any horse's tail unless there is a medical reason to do so. Something that actually medically requires amputation of that part of the tail. I understand the safety concerns with the tail and the harness for people that are driving, but my recommendation in that situation would be to use a tail bag. A tail bag would allow a horse to keep their entire tailbone, so like their entire spine, and keep all of the lengths of hair that are equally beneficial while preventing the tail from getting caught in the harness. This also wouldn't take more than a minute or two per horse each day. Tail docking, unless done for medical reasons, offers no benefit to the horse, only to the humans. While tail docking provides convenience for the humans, it often causes pain or discomfort for the horse. Not to mention taking away part of their ability to properly communicate, thermoregulate, and defend themselves from mosquitoes, hornets, bees, wasps, and flies. Tail docking is 100% a welfare issue, and the laws surrounding it need to change. Tail docking horses is becoming more restricted throughout the world, and I think that that is amazing. I think that we are finally taking steps forward for equine welfare, even if it is in just such a small, specific arena. I think that it is such an important step forward, and hopefully more countries, provinces, states, territories will continue to update their rules surrounding it, and hopefully we can get more bans and more regulations surrounding it. So that is all I've got for you guys today. I hope that you enjoyed. I hope that maybe you learned something. This is a topic that I'm very passionate about, so if you have any questions, please let me know. Also, please share your thoughts on this topic, share your potential experiences if you have any in the comments. I would love to hear from you. You can follow me over on Instagram and TikTok if you would like to see more of my everyday life with my animals. I post over there quite regularly. The links to both will be in the description. If you've got a video that you would like me to react to, you can send it to this email address here. That will also be in the description. If you have a topic request, you can put that down in the comments with all of your other thoughts. If you liked today's video, maybe think about hitting like, hitting subscribe. I make new videos every single week. Thank you so much for joining me today, and until I see you next time, think critically.